Hello, everybody. It's Brittany, aka oklasotagal. I am here with you today. I have brought in a good friend of mine. Paula Sophia Schonauer is somebody I have known for many years now. And when I was a baby attorney in Oklahoma City, and Paula was still a police officer in Oklahoma City, one of my early cases was a police civil rights use of force case against a suburban police department in the Oklahoma City area. And I retained Paula on that case in the background to, help me read through department policies and help me understand, the right questions to ask, what kind of things we're looking at when we're looking at these incidents. And so, with Paula's massive experience in law enforcement, I thought it would be nice to talk to her today a little bit about the incident that took place in my current home state of Minnesota yesterday, and to go over that and talk about what happened, discuss, what the Trump regime is saying about it, what local officials are saying about it, and kind of come to some kind of shared truth and understanding of the facts as we know them. So, Paula, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm honored. Thank you.
Well, Paula, I know I said you have a lot of experience in police work. Could you give us a little bit of your background as a police officer and any training you did as a police officer?
I, I retired in 2014 after 22 years of service with the Oklahoma City Police Department. And during my time of service, I spent mostly in patrol activities. I was a field training officer. I was a Asian organized crime investigator working with the FBI task force. I also was a field training officer. So I trained recruits in the field for several years, and I was an instructor at the Oklahoma City Police Academy. And the classes I taught focused on community-oriented policing as well as control and defensive tactics.
And in
And
your 22 years of service, um, I imagine there were opportunities where you had to, or no, I shouldn't say opportunities, that's probably not a good word, but incidents where you maybe had to pull your weapon. Would that be accurate?
numerous times, multiple times. But justification for pulling a weapon isn't the same as justification for use of deadly force.
Right. Okay. And so the incident in question, I'm sure most of you who are watching this have likely seen the video already. But before we get deeper into questions about this, I'm going to share my screen and play a little bit of some New York Times breakdown of the video footage that we have. And then on the other side of that, Paula and I will talk some more about that. So I'm gonna try to pull that up now so we can all be working from the same information here. And let's see, I need to share the correct window. Oh, hold on a second. In the meantime, while I'm doing that, um, I want to make sure I close up what I don't need because I don't want to share my email with all of you. Um, you don't all get to see my inbox. I'm sorry. Um, yeah, let's get this up here. There we go. Share. Okay, and now I'm going to hit play. All right. So that was a pretty nice breakdown of the video footage closest to the scene that we've seen so far. Was there anything in that you felt like the narrator got wrong about the facts there?
No, it looks like it's a pretty good analysis from what we can see in the video.
Yeah, and then from what we can see and hear, there's certainly a lot of commotion. It
Yes.
appears she was driving down the road. And I do want to clarify some facts here because I've been following a lot of the local coverage here in Minnesota because that's where I'm getting the best facts from. And according to Minnesota Public Radio reporting, both the woman, Renee Nicole Good, who was the woman who was shot and driving that Honda SUV, they say both her mom and her ex-husband say that she was actually just driving home from having dropped off her 6-year-old son at school. So there were initial reports that she was maybe a legal observer or a protester. I will say that right now, as of now, the sources that I can confirm from Minnesota, I don't have confirmation that she was there in any kind of protesting capacity. It's very it's very possible that she was literally just driving home from dropping her kid off at school, ran into this crazy traffic situation in the road because that's a main roadway running through South Minneapolis, right down the street from where she lives. Came upon this mess of vehicles, got stuck, was trying to turn around. And even in the video, you can see her wave one of the ICE vehicles by, and it drives by just fine. So when Secretary Nome claims that she was there trying to target agents in some kind of domestic terrorist capacity and was a protester there trying to harass agents, the facts don't support that right now. So I want to put that out there. Is that any issues there?
No, that's what it looked like to me. That she didn't seem to be trying to deliberately um, block traffic, and but that I don't know why she was angled like she was exactly, but she wasn't deliberately trying to block people. And and numerous, several vehicles went by with, and she
Yeah.
didn't molest them or apparently yell at them or flip them off or anything like that.
Yeah, and also, witnesses there on scene are saying she was being yelled conflicting orders, that some agents had already been yelling at her to turn around and go the other way. And
Yes.
then as she was trying to do that, other agents started yelling at her to get out of the car. As you saw in the video, that silver truck, she was waving them by, and then they decided to stop and hop out and rush her car. I'm not sure for what reason, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Paula, but, ICE and immigration officials, their jurisdiction is over immigration crimes. And if they believed she was committing some other kind of traffic violation worthy of a traffic stop or to get her out of her vehicle, they could just have local law enforcement deal with that. It's not something really that they would necessarily deal with.
When they got out and approached her from, that makes it a traffic stop
Okay.
in my opinion. And I have a lot of problems with how they conducted said traffic stop.
Right.
They did not do it in a way that, in a manner that is consistent with how I was trained to do a traffic stop. And also, um, the grabbing the door handle and demanding her to get out is not consistent with my training on how to perform a traffic stop. They did not follow standard safety protocols. They were very aggressive in the way that they approached her, and just seemed to not heed um, what most professional police officers in professional police departments across the country adhere to.
Yeah. And for full disclosure to the audience, because Paula and I are friends, we've had many discussions about various use of force incidents over the years. And I'm sure Paula can attest, I am not somebody who automatically assumes that the police are always in the wrong. Even though my job has required me to sue police departments from time to time, my goal in that is to get police to behave in a constitutional manner and not in an unconstitutional manner. So my
Right.
goal isn't to be anti-police or anti-law enforcement. It's to make sure that our law enforcement are living up to their obligations and responsibilities and not hurting the citizenry and violating our rights. So I'm sure Paula can attest. There are times I've picked on videos, and anyone who's followed me on Threads for the last few years has seen me post videos where I say, look, that person not following orders and not getting out of the car, yeah, that's why they got dragged out of the car eventually. Because you do, at some level, when officers say get out of the vehicle, there is a legal obligation to do so. So, maybe there was potentially a legal obligation once they approached her car and said, get out of the car. But
That,
that's not the end of the analysis, right? That doesn't, even if she broke that rule or that law, there's still now other regulations around use of force and specifically use of deadly force. And so even if we were to grant, okay, they ordered her out of the car, she didn't comply and tried to keep going. Okay, we can grant that for the sake of argument because there is some evidence to suggest that might be going on, even though from her perspective, she might have been getting yelled at from two different sides. So we don't know who she was hearing or what she was hearing, but we do know somebody ordered her out of that car as they approached the driver's side door.
well,
Um,
I could tell you what I would have done in that situation is when once I've decided to get out of the car and approach the a vehicle in a traffic stop, I probably because the way that her vehicle was angled would I would have asked her to pull over in a way that's safer, not only for her but for myself included. And then I would have asked her for ID and insurance.
right. You would
Um,
not have just immediately rushed to the car yelling, "Get out of
well,
the fucking car."
no,
With
that's
a
not
mask on.
right. Well, we wouldn't. The only time that I recall ever using a mask when I was on duty was like during times like the H1N1 virus in 2009. Some officers were using those N95 masks, for their own health and safety and stuff like that. But in general, as a policy to conduct their operations in a masked, as masked officers, that was not in public interface a common thing. Maybe like the tactical unit, they would wear masks, when doing, particular high, highly dangerous raids
Sure,
in drug
sure.
houses or known violent criminal suspects, stuff like that.
Yeah, so completely different scenario than somebody maybe obstructing and or, not moving their vehicle quick enough.
Yeah, I mean, so I give you an instance. It involves a celebrity, but one time I was involved in a pursuit, and the vehicle in question crashed and hit a light pole in Oklahoma City. near Northwest 31st and Classen, and then the car then rolled a couple of times. So there was debris all over the roadway, potentially evidence, and I was the first person on the scene, trying to, preserve the crime scene because it was involved a pursuit of a stolen vehicle and potentially a drug dealing suspect. And a vehicle, I was trying to contain the scene, and a vehicle approached, and then when I tried to stop him to redirect him so he wouldn't roll right through the scene and potentially destroy evidence, he just waved at me and drove on. My response to that was, "Hey, any responding officer?" In this case, it was a green Acura, something, a car like that. I said, "Hey, there's a green Acura that rolled through my scene and did not obey my command to redirect. Could you stop that guy and give him a ticket, please, and identify him?" And one, to penalize his disregard of my direct order. Two, to get his name on record if I were to have to testify in court about, why some evidence on the scene was destroyed.
Sure.
Turned out that person driving through the scene was a famous NFL quarterback.
Uh,
And so
oh, hey. Maybe thought you were waving at him.
no, no, he was not that. He
I
just
mean, we don't know. You know how many times they get their heads hit. Who knows what's going through their mind?
yeah.
Hey, it's a fan.
Yeah, so the other officer, stopped him and identified him and did what was appropriate. He didn't decide to write that guy a ticket. That's fine.
But you still had the record of the encounter. Everything
Exactly.
was done by the book.
And
And in this case, coming back to Minneapolis yesterday, her SUV was parked there for a moment. We had
yes,
at least one agent who ended up being the shooter, who it appeared to be was filming around her car.
yeah,
So, if the concern was we need to get her for obstruction, well, who cares if she flees? You've got her photo evidence, you've got a make and model and description of the vehicle, you've got the license plate.
right,
There's literally zero reason to escalate now
right.
and start pulling out a gun, right?
No, well, in the case of pulling out a gun could be justified when it's apparent that the vehicle is not fully stopped, and potential for someone to direct the car at an officer that is on foot. And so I don't have a problem with them pulling out weapons, to assure their safety. But as I stated before in this interview, that um, pulling out a weapon is not the same as using deadly force.
Correct.
It is a protective measure, but it does not constitute justification for deadly force. And
Yeah, and
so,
so on that, I wanted to look at, since we're talking about federal law enforcement in this case and not just city law enforcement,
I
I have pulled up the Department of Justice regulations that regulate federal agents on their use of force. And I particularly found this interesting because it goes directly into this subject matter of when somebody's in a vehicle and might be fleeing. So the deadly force regs directly address scenarios like this. And so first off, deadly force is only when necessary. So you have to know that it's necessary because there's an imminent danger of death or physical injury. As we saw in that video, the first shot was not fired until the gentleman his feet were already clear of the vehicle when he fired the first shot in that breakdown.
Exactly.
So at that point, and I want to add something to this because Minnesota is also has interesting self-defense laws that are unlike the laws down in the South in places like Oklahoma and Texas. In Minnesota, there is an affirmative duty to retreat. So if somebody is coming at you with a car or a gun, you do not have the right in Minnesota to stand your ground and begin firing if you have a reasonable opportunity to just get out of the way.
Right.
So I want to add that to the nuance of the law that might be at play here.
But even in Oklahoma, which is the stand your ground laws are more permissive, there is still the reasonable person standard. And in that case, I think that ICE officer has would in has a difficult case in making that he feared for his life,
Yeah,
and especially in the way that he discharged his firearm. Um, he he used it in a way, approached the driver at point blank range, Miss Good, and then fired 2 to 3 times, fatal shots at her face and head. That that arguably is not a reasonable response. That looked to me like vindictiveness, and in what is commonly referred to among my former colleagues as contempt of cop, when someone violates their authority,
hmm,
that be careful, not to penalize people for contempt of cop,
right.
because that gets you in trouble. And
And
that's
that's
what
hard to do. I want to give law enforcement credit. Like it's a very difficult job to separate your personal feelings out in moments when people are directly disobeying orders and things are getting tense. So I grant that it's difficult.
yeah, there are provisions for what's necessary and then for what's punitive.
Right.
And police officers are not in the business of punishment.
And
It's
am I wrong? I've seen this discussion a bit on social media that some folks have been saying even if a shooting is justifiable, that law enforcement are trained to go center mass, not face and head. Is there any
oh,
truth to that?
there is, but there is also in 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 firearms training, um, training to shoot at the head.
Okay.
In my experience, where we would when we were doing our firearms qualification, from we would start off from basically um, uh, 50 meters, then move up to a 25 meter, then to a 15 meter, and then to point blank range as the incident yesterday was.
Okay.
And there were times that, when we're at within the 15 meter and closer, that we would shoot center mass, but also shoot at the head too. Um,
Okay.
but
So
but
so there can be exceptions to where that might come into play.
now this is the thing though. When you shoot a firearm at somebody, it is deadly force. And there has to be strong justification for the use of deadly force, and it is for um, putting a permanent stop to the threat. And so they're not
Right.
shooting to wound because there's too much opportunity to miss, and they're not shoot and even though at a closer range we would do the headshots in our training and qualification, generally the shots are center mass because that's what's easier to hit and
Right.
aim. and that reduces the chance of stray bullets that would hurt innocent bystanders.
Yeah, and that's another thing here is this officer's opening fire on a car when there's crowds of people around. So, he's got to also be thinking about the reasonableness of firing into that vehicle. What if he misses and now he hits a bystander over on the sidewalk?
Or a pest.
Yeah.
I mean,
So again, and in this deadly force from the DOJ, right out of their own handbook, they may not discharge at a moving vehicle unless the person in the vehicle is threatening the officer or another person with deadly force by means other than the vehicle, or the vehicle is operated in a manner that threatens to cause death or serious injury to the officer or others, and no other objectively reasonable means appear to exist, which includes moving out of the path of the vehicle.
and the officers that were there were already out of the path of that vehicle.
So,
You
and if anything, it appears that firing at her caused more danger because that's what caused the vehicle to then accelerate down the street and crash into another car and a light pole,
and then
completely out of control.
potentially there could have been other protesters or bystanders right there that were, but it would have been in the path of that vehicle and hurt
So
or
that created more danger
it
for the
did.
bystanders and people around, not less danger.
Exactly. Exactly.
So so basically what we're coming to the conclusion of here is if you review this video footage and the evidence that we've been seeing, the officer at the very least acted in a reckless manner by firing into that vehicle after he had already cleared its pathway. It appears to be in violation of the DOJ's own regulations.
And then the
And
deal,
yet, Secretary Nome, within minutes of the shooting, was already spreading a narrative that she was a protester who was there attempting to run over officers, attempting to target them, and that she was a domestic terrorist. This
I think,
37-year-old mom in an SUV was a domestic terrorist, according to the regime.
and I think that the term domestic terrorist was used to be able to justify the level of force because the according to the Garner decision in the U.S. Supreme Court in 1985, they severely restricted the law enforcement ability to shoot at fleeing felons and
Yeah,
using deadly force for fleeing felons. And so the criteria has to be that, there has to be some pretty extreme circumstances to justify firing on a fleeing felon that would make that person that they're firing upon would be a greater danger to the public than if they just would let that person go and follow up later.
right.
Um,
And here we have a woman who, at worst, might have been guilty of obstruction, might have been guilty of not getting out of resisting without violence by not getting out of the car upon being asked to.
and then the applicable traffic charges.
But nothing that would say, if we let this person drive off, she's gonna go hurt people.
Right. But they want to call her a domestic terrorist to imply that she would.
Right.
And
And
which
they had her license plate, they had her make and model, they had all other manner of means by which they could have called other officers and said, "Hey, Minneapolis PD, this maroon Honda Pilot just took off from the scene. Can you go pull her over?" They did none of that.
yeah, is I mean they did none of that. I mean, just like when on my traffic stop after the pursuit, when that one person drove through my crime scene right there, you know, um,
You just didn't pull your gun out and start shooting at the car?
No, I did not. And Brittany, I've been in this situation numerous times. Let the vehicle go, call in a description and a tag number and say, if anyone's in the area, you spot this vehicle, could you stop them and identify them?
Right.
You know,
And that would have been a reasonable, response if you thought that what she was doing was somehow obstructing, right?
and in my experience in law enforcement, and I have to admit that a lot's changed in the last 12 years, as far as the way federal law enforcement is doing their things. But usually, in my past experience with federal law enforcement prior to the Trump era, when federal agents were doing raids, like on the scale that ICE does their raids, they would routinely have local uniformed units standing by and participating for exactly these kinds of situations to help control civilian populace, traffic, to enhance the safety of the officers executing the either the warrants or the investigative raids and stuff like that. And ICE seems to not do that.
Yeah, I can say that both Governor Walz and Mayor Jacob Fry have indicated that the Department of Homeland Security had no communication with officials in Minnesota about their operations, about where they would be operating. And so those local law enforcement officials are saying they didn't talk to us or give us any kind of heads up about what they were doing.
And ICE doesn't even use marked vehicles. They barely have any identifiable uniforms a lot of times. Just a vest that says ICE
Hmm.
and no badges, no name tags. They wear masks. You know, the we don't know if they're just dressed up and 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 playing police or if they're really who they say they are.
Yeah,
And
it's especially egregious up here in Minnesota. We're literally in June of 2025, a man dressed up as an undercover police officer in tactical gear, driving an old unmarked police officer that he put the lights back into to make it look like he was a cop, and got these legislators to open their doors after midnight so he could shoot at them and their families.
mhm.
So we already can see that non-identifiable officers can lead to some really serious and egregious results.
And
And yet they're continuing this practice.
with that history, one can make the argument that Renee Good could reasonably expect that upon exiting her vehicle, she would have been assaulted, maybe severely, maybe killed, beaten to death, or shot, or arrested and detained on no charges and kept in custody for days on end in deplorable conditions.
Right.
Why why would anybody willingly submit to that when they can reasonably expect that that's how they're going to be treated?
Absolutely. And that's not theoretical. I'm forgetting his name right now, but there was a gentleman, I believe in California, who was a military veteran in the United States, U.S. citizen, was driving home from work through an ice scene, ran into a similar scenario, was trying to turn around and get out of there, didn't get out fast enough, apparently, got drugged from his vehicle and put into a jail cell for I think 4 or 5 days before he finally got out. And he was like, I wasn't even trying to disobey anybody. He's like, they were coming at me from all sides. I was trying to do what the first one told me to do, and before I knew it, I'm just in the middle of this chaos. And so, I've watched hundreds of police videos as part of my career and part of, staying on top of these things. I can tell you that when local police or sheriffs or state troopers pull people over, they walk up to the window, they identify themselves. They often give these folks several minutes if there's a back and forth before they'll even resort to the enough force to pull them out of the vehicle. So
Mhm.
the idea that you would need to just rush up to the window and immediately start grabbing at the door, it just blows my mind because that's so unlike any other police interactions I watch on a regular basis.
One of the things that I've noticed with the way that ICE conducts themselves is they have no regard for the Fourth Amendment.
Right.
Repeatedly, with the way that they seize people, the way that they use force on people when there's really no justification or even reasonable suspicion that these people are involved in criminal activity, and then detain these people for sometimes days, weeks, and months
Yeah.
without any real charges. Um, it is appalling. And I've talked to a number of my former colleagues and other police officers around the country that I know that are like, they don't operate in a way that's consistent with the law and respectful of the Fourth Amendment, and routinely on a routine basis. Yesterday is not a surprise. It was a question of when, not if,
Right.
that would happen, and it did happen. And unfortunately, it happened in a way that it took, their activities took the life of a young woman who is an upstanding citizen in her community, a mother, and a spouse. And it's tragic all around and unjustified all around. And and then by the statements that our president and the Secretary of Homeland Security issued yesterday were irregular. They've already made conclusions. And I know just by the way that Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, United States Attorney General, has conducted herself, that she's going to toe the party line on this, and that there's not going to be real justice for the shooter. In fact, that which was highly irregular, they they took the shooter totally out of the scene, apparently, and which that's not ordinary. I mean,
Yeah, I'm also seeing reports this morning. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which is our statewide, state version of an FBI. In Oklahoma, it's the OSBI. In Minnesota, it's the BCA. BCA is reporting that the FBI is refusing to share evidence or any information about the shooting now. And so the federal officials are trying to completely ice out any state involvement in the investigation. Um,
yeah,
what looks like to be able to cover it up and continue to gaslight and tell us a completely false narrative about what happened. Now, this is beyond your expertise and what I brought you on for, but I think it's a good kind of place to maybe close this discussion. I saw a post by Radley Balco, who had previously been an activist against the drug war, who, follows, political propaganda and its use in the world. And he had said something to the effect that, part of the reason for the immediate false narrative, in spite of the evidence, and he said it does them better that it doesn't match the evidence because the message the administration is trying to send to their ICE agents is that no matter how egregious your behavior, we will circle the wagons and defend you and allow you free reign to do whatever you feel like you need to do while you're out there. Does that track with what you kind of see?
Yeah, that does track. And we have examples of that kind of behavior in law enforcement agencies, i.e., um, in Missouri, with in the case of Michael Brown, of the law enforcement agency trying to, poison the investigation and portray Michael Brown as more of a threat than he actually was, and things like that. And it was so obvious and it was so awkward that they of course came under, federal scrutiny and faced, penalties. And then again,
Back when we had a federal government that cared about such
or
things.
or or exactly, or when the same thing when I am so sorry. The same thing when the you know with the murder of George Floyd.
Mhm.
There was significant and strident federal follow-up on that, even when the Trump administration was in power. And,
Right. Because that was
and
the first Trump admin, not
yeah, the
this
first
one.
Trump administration. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
The
so
the one where there were still some more guardrails in place.
yeah, they hadn't dismantled everything the way that they have in the last year.
Well, Paula, this has been a really good chat. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want to say about this incident?
I want to make a statement about the people that say, um, you know that that she just should have complied. If she would just comply with officer directives, ICE directives, then she wouldn't be dead. We're not seeing ICE officers comporting themselves in a way that makes people trust them, and in a way that erodes public trust for all law enforcement. Why would someone want to willingly comply with the directives of an ICE officer when the penalties of that compliance can often result in, illegal detention, mistreatment, deplorable conditions like drinking water out of a toilet,
Hmm.
some of these ICE facilities, and different things like that. One of the things that, like, in the United States military, in the Geneva Conventions about how to treat, enemy prisoners of war, and that there is a vested interest in people conducting themselves in a way that doesn't, that promotes more trust, that if enemy combatants surrender to us, that they can trust not to be abused. Of course, things during the Iraqi freedom campaign, with Abu Ghraib and those things, eroded that trust. ICE is eroding trust for law enforcement across the board in the way that they conduct things, and their total disregard for the Fourth Amendment. So that's what I would like to say. It's become reasonable. One can make the argument that it's become reasonable to resist them.
Right. Yeah, and I want to add just, obviously, you know, we don't expect things to change anytime soon. I think we can expect probably more incidents like this. I will urge everybody speak up now because the penalty for not speaking up now will be that we won't be allowed to speak up later.
Mhm.
This is the time. Call your Congress people. If you're in Oklahoma, especially, Senator Langford was on TV this morning lying about this incident. I want you to call Senator Langford's office and quote, "Thou shalt not bear false witness."
No doubt.
He is a Christian minister. He holds himself out as this great Christian. And I will give Senator Langford some credit. Despite my many disagreements with him on policy, he has been at times a very serious politician who has worked across the aisle to try to get real work done. He was one of the key negotiators trying to get an actual immigration bill done that would have solved a lot of the issues that we're seeing now. And so it's really, really extremely disappointing and disheartening that he would go out there and spread a completely false narrative about this 37-year-old mother who was gunned down by masked federal agents in the streets. And to see people who have "Don't Tread on Me" flags on their trucks cheering this on, um, sirs, you are cheering on the treading.
Yeah, it's
This
crazy.
is the government treading you were trying to
Yeah,
warn us about. It's
it,
time
it,
to join the correct side of this.
exactly. And honestly,
You
that's
finally got progressives like me talking states' rights and like talking, limited government. Come join us.
yeah, the captain flag, is a useful part of our history, and it spoke to these unlawful seizures and invasions of homes and stuff like that.
It was exactly these kinds of incidents that prompted the settlers in the colonies to revolt against King George because the redcoats were comporting themselves exactly the way these ICE agents are comporting themselves,
Exactly.
as if they had no recourse, nobody could stop them or tell them what to do, and they just behaved arbitrarily and indiscriminately. And that's what finally caused our colonialists to get fed up and say, "F you, King George, we're doing our own thing now."
Yeah.
So maybe this becomes a spark that helps us to regain some coalition and to really fight back and get our government back. So Paula, thanks again for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, and it sucks that it's under these circumstances, but I hope that this video is helpful to those of you looking for some calm, rational analysis about what we're actually seeing here.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to do this.
All righty.